Within the party, all of your friends and colleagues in the party, your expectation surely now is that it's just a matter of time before you move in and get hold of your red boxes.
Well, I have to say, I think speculation is the remit of the commentator rather than the politician, Hugh.
I'm asking for the sense in the party. You can tell us what colleagues are saying.
Well, what I'm going to say to you is actually what I've said before, which is that what we know is that those negotiations are continuing. Obviously, the resumption of those negotiations showed that the Liberal Democrats were coming back to talk to us about the possibilities that and the offer that was on the table and look at some of the detail within that. And we wait to see what comes out of those negotiations. But we all want that, a government in place that is, as I say, going to be able to take those really difficult decisions that lie ahead.
Understood.
One key thing that happened today was not just the negotiations last night or today with the Labour Party, which the Liberal Democrats claim were difficult, but a reaction on the backbenches of the Labour Party and within the Cabinet saying, we don't think this is a good idea. Last night we saw John Reid, the former Home Secretary, David Blunkett, the former Home Secretary, joined ever so quietly by Andy Burnham, the Health Secretary, from within the Cabinet, by Jack Straw, I'm told, within the Cabinet, by others I can't name, within the Cabinet, who said, this deal is not right, it shouldn't happen, we need to prove to the voters that we have listened and learnt, and trying to form a coalition which might be dubbed by our enemies as the coalition of the losers will not help.
Nick, Teresa, just let's pause for a second, because if you're just joining us here on BBC One and the BBC News channel, this is a BBC News special from Westminster, where the negotiations between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats have been going on now this afternoon for more than 3 hours. The expectation is that they will reach some kind of agreement, and that before the end of tonight, we will be able to say with some certainty that David Cameron is to be the new Prime Minister. That's certainly the direction in which people seem to be travelling. The negotiations I mentioned to you are taking place in the Cabinet Office. That's just up the road from here on Whitehall. And Carol Walker, our political correspondent, is keeping tabs on things there. Carol, is there any sign of action?
I have to say, Hugh, it's just a question of waiting and a mounting anticipation and some excitement, and the crowds around us building up all the time. There would be, of course, always plenty of media here on this sort of occasion, but we've had large groups of bystanders, tourists joining in, demonstrators and so on. And in terms of concrete word, we've heard nothing since 2 o'clock when William Hague went in with George Osborne, the Shadow Chancellor, and Oliver Letwin. Just ahead of them, we had the Liberal Democrat team led by Chris Huhne with Andrew Stunnell and David Laws. What William Hague was saying as he went in was that they wanted to try to reach an agreement that would lead to a stable government and with an elected leader. Now, of course, that was before we heard that word, that the Labour Party talks with the Liberal Democrats were effectively at an end. I hope you can hear me, because there is really quite a noise from the crowd around me here. But no, those negotiations have now been going on for almost 3.5 hours. We know that what the Conservative Party have offered the Liberal Democrats is a referendum on a change to the voting system, and it's been made pretty clear to me from Conservatives, both publicly and privately, that that's pretty much as far as they're prepared to go in terms of electoral reform. But of course they're going to be talking about other matters too. They're going to be talking about taxation on the Liberal Democrats' goal of trying to help some of the lowest paid workers. They're going to be talking about moving to a green economy. They're going to be talking about some of the things they do agree with, like ID cards. They're going to be talking about education reforms, and of course about the shape of this agreement, whether it is formal jobs in a coalition government. That was what William Hague said he wanted last night, or whether, because of the concerns on the Liberal Democrat side about being so closely involved with the Conservative Party, whether we're looking at a rather broader agreement, which would mean the Liberal Democrats agreeing to support the Conservatives through the budget, through key pieces of legislation, and agreeing not to support any kind of no confidence motion. All that, we have to assume, is now a part of the detailed discussions that are going on, and a real sense of anticipation as we await the teams coming out of that door and telling us the shape and the outcome of the discussions which could shape our government.
Carol, thank you very much. Very noisy Whitehall, a real sense of drama and expectation there. Carol will be back clearly very quickly if something happens. I'm just going to turn the corner into Downing Street and join John Sopel, who's there for us with Laura Kuenssberg, and ask you, John, for what you're picking up.
Well, Hugh, fascinating, isn't it? Because this time yesterday we were talking to each other. Gordon Brown had just made that dramatic announcement that he would go to facilitate talks between the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, and all the talk then was of a Lib-Lab coalition. Spool forward 24 hours and here we are saying, well, the game is almost up and it looks like it is going to be a Liberal Democrat Conservative deal, and Gordon Brown may be getting ready to say goodbye to his staff. Laura Kuenssberg is with me. Laura, what do you make of the day?
Well, John, I've been here through the day, and if you like, the story can be told by the faces of the cabinet ministers who've been coming and going. We saw members of the Labour negotiating team who'd been with the Liberal Democrats first thing, looking bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and saying that the talks had been positive. They were optimistic about some kind of a deal, except senior Liberal Democrats were saying something else to us. They were saying that the talks had been quite frosty. They'd been surprised by the hostility shown to them by some of the Labour negotiating team. So we were from early on in this morning starting to feel that Labour and the Lib Dems were not going to be able to work together.
What seems odd about that is that presumably over the weekend, when they were reaching out to each other, there was that private meeting that took place, which sort of exploded like a bombshell yesterday. Presumably they thought there must be enough common ground to bring this all into play and risking the talks with the Conservatives.
Yes, I think that is true. There was certainly a feeling that culturally the two parties have got more in common. And let's face it, in other times perhaps, many more Liberal Democrats might have been much happier to work with the Labour Party as much more natural bedfellows. But I think what has happened in the course of the last 24 hours is the Liberal Democrats were surprised by how inflexible Labour were prepared to be when the Tories were basically promising to make quite a big concession to them in terms of offering them a vote on completely shaking up the voting system in Westminster. The other thing that has occurred is a realisation within the Lib Dems and in Labour's own ranks that many voters might have looked on in horror at the idea of there being a second unelected Labour Prime Minister here in Downing Street. And I think that has dawned on people very sharply today.
OK, Laura, thank you very much indeed. Hugh, I was going to say to you that I don't think that much is going to happen in the next few minutes, but it was about this time yesterday when they brought out the lectern. 5 minutes later, Gordon Brown was coming out. But probably what is going to happen is that they're going to wait until any announcement from the Cabinet Office before there is a response from here in Downing Street.
John, thank you very much. John Sopel there in Downing Street with Laura Kuenssberg. Now with me here in the studio on College Green, Nick Robinson, our political editor, still here, Professor Peter Hennessy and Ben Page of the pollsters Ipsos Mori with us too, and it's good to have you with us.
Hello.
Nick, the latest you have.
Well, I've had a message from someone inside Downing Street effectively now conceding defeat. I've had a message that said the Liberals had already decided. This message claims to go with the Tories, that they were going through the motions in the talks and saying Labour will have to regroup as the only progressive party. In other words, close friends of Gordon Brown's are now merely waiting for the moment that he resigns. Now, in theory, he could go before David Cameron has a deal because Peter Hennessy is here and he will confirm or deny this. He knows better than I do. But really, the Prime Minister's duty was to see if he could form a majority. Once it's clear that he can't, he can go. And